Welcome to the deep dive.
All right, so imagine this. Someone just sends a quick little message
Yeah.
to like a core part of your Kubernetes setup.
Right.
And boom, they can run whatever code they want. That's what we're dealing with right now.
Yeah.
It's a pretty serious vulnerability. It affects the Ingress NGINX controller for Kubernetes. And get this, over 6,500 clusters are already like right in the danger zone.
Yeah. I mean, it's really the ease of access here that's so concerning.
Really?
We're talking about a situation where an attacker doesn't even need to be authenticated. If they've got network access to this vulnerable part, they can get a real foothold.
Right.
And this just shows how important it is to have really secure configurations, even for services that seem like they're just internal.
Totally. So in this deep dive, we're going to like really get into it, like
Yeah.
to the core of this threat. It's been dubbed Ingress Nightmare.
Catchy name.
Right. We're going to break down why this is such a big deal, especially with all the ransomware stuff going around these days. And we'll lay out exactly what you can do to see if you're vulnerable. And then, most importantly, how to fix it.
Absolutely. And just to give everyone some background, we're pulling this information from some top-notch cybersecurity news sources.
Yeah.
Plus, we've got some deep analysis from the folks at Phoenix Security and the Kubernetes Security Response Committee.
Oh, yeah.
So, their insights really give us a complete picture of this vulnerability and just how bad it could get.
Okay, now, super important point here. We're specifically talking about the Ingress NGINX controller for Kubernetes.
Right.
There's another project, similar name. It's called the NGINX Ingress controller. Thankfully, that one's not affected by this particular vulnerability.
Yeah.
So just to be crystal clear, we're focused on the Ingress NGINX controller for Kubernetes.
That's the one. And that distinction is super important as you look at your own systems, right?
Oh, yeah.
Because the names are so close, it'd be easy to get them mixed up.
Easy to get confused.
Yeah. Making sure you're looking at the right component, that's the first step in knowing if you're at risk or not.
Okay, so let's dive into the nitty-gritty of Ingress Nightmare.
Right.
This isn't just one little flaw. It's actually a group of 5 pretty serious vulnerabilities. We've got CVE 2025-24513, CVE 2025-24514, CVE 2025-1097, CVE 2025-2198, and the worst one, CVE 2025-1974.
Yeah.
And they've all been given these high CVSS scores, the highest one being a 9.8. That's pretty bad.
It's critical. And, what's important to realize is that these vulnerabilities, they're not necessarily isolated threats, right? They can be chained together, which makes the risk so much worse.
Oh, yeah.
That's what Phoenix Security really emphasized in their research. Like, exploiting one vulnerability could lead to another, and then another, and that's when things get really, really bad.
And the big problem here is with this thing called the admission controller. It's part of the Ingress NGINX controller. Now, the admission controller's job is to make sure that only the right things are allowed to change the configuration of your Kubernetes cluster.
Like a gatekeeper.
Exactly. But here's the kicker. In a lot of cases, and we're talking about something like 43% of cloud environments, according to the reports, this admission controller is out there on the network without any authentication whatsoever.
Yeah. And when you think about the admission controller's job, controlling what gets into your cluster, having it exposed like that is a huge security risk.
Right.
Essentially, it means anyone who can reach it on the network could potentially mess with your Ingress controller. Not good.
So how does the attack actually work? Bad guys, they can inject their own nasty NGINX configurations remotely, and they do it by sending these things called admission review requests, which are basically requests to change things in your cluster, and they send them directly to this unprotected admission controller.
Right.
And that leads to them being able to run their code on the Ingress NGINX controller's pod.
And the pod, that's the basic unit of deployment in Kubernetes.
Right.
So if they get code running on the pod, they're well on their way to controlling a lot more. And what makes this even scarier, as Phoenix Security pointed out, is that the admission controller often has a lot of privileges. And on top of that, it's got unrestricted access to the network. This creates a really dangerous path for attackers to gain even more power within your cluster.
Like, they hit the jackpot. A successful exploit could give them unauthorized access to all the secrets stored across all the namespaces in your entire Kubernetes cluster. We're talking passwords, API tokens, the keys to the kingdom.
Yeah, if those get compromised, it's game over. They could take over the whole thing.
And the Kubernetes Security Response Committee, they're especially worried about CVE 2025-1974.
Right.
While the other CVEs in this group are about how specific configuration things are handled, this one, CVE 2025-1974, it can be combined with those other weaknesses to basically take over a whole cluster without needing any logins or admin rights.
Scary stuff, yeah. That completely changes the game when it comes to how easy it is to attack.
Let's get a little more specific about how these attacks actually work. So CVE 2025-24514, CVE 2025-2097, and CVE 2025-2098, they all have to do with abusing certain Ingress annotations, things like authorl, authors match CN, mirror target, and mirror host.
Yeah.
Now, these are meant to be helpful features, for things like setting up authentication or mirroring traffic, but attackers can twist them and inject their own malicious configurations right into NGINX.
Sneaky, right?
It is. What Phoenix Security's research really highlighted is how attackers can manipulate these legitimate features.
Right.
By crafting these annotations just right within the admission review requests, they can basically trick the NGINX controller into doing things it shouldn't. And that opens the door to running their code and grabbing sensitive data.
And this injected configuration, according to the reports, can let them execute any code they want within the Ingress NGINX controller's environment. And even worse, it can expose all those secrets the controller has access to, which, by default, could be all the secrets in the whole cluster. Yikes. Now, let's talk about CVE 2025-1974 again, the one with that super high 9.8 severity score. This one's particularly nasty because under certain conditions, all an attacker needs is network access to the pod network, and they can run whatever code they want. No authentication needed. The Kubernetes Security Response Committee, they were very clear that this vulnerability can make all the other Ingress Nightmare flaws even worse. It basically paves the way for a complete system takeover without needing any prior access.
Phoenix Security actually gave a real-world example of how this could be exploited. They laid out this experimental attack where an attacker could use NGINX's client body buffer feature to upload a malicious shared library, which is like a chunk of bad code, right onto the pod. And then they could follow that up with a carefully crafted admission review request.
Right.
They'd use one of the configuration injection vulnerabilities to tell NGINX to load and run that bad code, and just like that remote code execution.
It's got a very clear picture of how the whole attack works. It's not just some theoretical thing.
Right.
Phoenix Security showed us that it's a totally viable way for attackers to gain control. Their research really drives home the point that these vulnerabilities are very likely to be exploited in the wild, and it's because of that dangerous combination: unauthenticated remote code execution and the potential to access secrets on a huge scale. And we do want to give credit to Wiz. They were the first to find these vulnerabilities and came up with that Ingress Nightmare name.
Right, good point. Okay, so why should all of this keep you up at night? Let's talk ransomware. Remote code execution, RCE, that's the holy grail for ransomware attackers.
Right.
If they can run their code on your systems, they've pretty much won the game.
Absolutely. And Phoenix Security's research had a pretty startling statistic. Something like 40.4% of ransomware attacks rely on remote code execution.
Wow.
So when you see a number that high, it really highlights how valuable this Ingress Nightmare vulnerability is to these ransomware groups.
And the Ingress NGINX controller, it's often sitting right on the edge of your network, exposed to the internet.
Yeah.
It becomes a prime target. Think about it.
Yeah. They compromise the Ingress controller, and they've got a straight shot to encrypt your data. They can even steal sensitive information. We're seeing that more and more in ransomware attacks.
That's right. And Phoenix Security also mentioned that privilege escalation, which is what these vulnerabilities allow through secret access, is part of almost 17% of ransomware attacks.
It's all connected.
Yeah, exactly. By getting their hands on those secrets in the Kubernetes cluster, attackers can easily gain more privileges. They can move around your environment, spreading like a virus, and ultimately deploy their ransomware across a much wider range of systems.
That's their goal, to move freely and gain admin control. Phoenix Security was pretty blunt in their assessment. They see Ingress Nightmare as a very likely way for ransomware groups to attack, specifically because of that unauthenticated RCE capability. And they even called out some big-name ransomware players like Clop and Conti. They've been known to use similar methods. That should be setting off some major alarm bells. It should. This isn't just some abstract threat. It's a real and present danger, especially for organizations that rely heavily on Kubernetes and have these exposed Ingress controllers. The potential for damage, both disruption and financial loss, from ransomware exploiting these flaws is significant.
It's a real threat. Okay, enough doom and gloom. Let's talk about what you can actually do about it. First things first, you need to figure out if you're even using the vulnerable component. It's easy to check. Just run this command in your Kubernetes cluster, kubectl get pods, all namespaces, selector app.kubernetes.io name, Ingress-NGINX. That'll show you any running pods with that label, which means you've got the Ingress NGINX controller.
All right, so once you know it's there, the most important thing to do is upgrade.
Upgrade, upgrade, upgrade.
Get to one of the patch versions right away. The developers have released 1.1.1, 1.1.5, and 1.10.7. They all fix these 5 vulnerabilities. This should be your top priority, bar none.
We get it. Sometimes upgrading right away is impossible. If you're stuck in that situation, there is a temporary way to reduce the risk, but it's not a perfect fix. You can disable the validating admission controller feature for a bit.
But it's important to understand that turning that off does lower your security in other ways.
Yeah.
That feature is really important for making sure your Ingress configurations are correct. But with this specific vulnerability, it's so severe that disabling it temporarily can help, especially with that CVE 2025-1974.
Yeah, makes sense. If you used Helm to deploy, you can disable it by reinstalling with this flag, controller.admission webhooks.enabled false.
Okay.
If you installed it manually, you'll need to delete the Ingress NGINX admission validating webhook configuration, and then remove the validating webhook argument from your Ingress NGINX controller containers arguments. That's in your deployment or daemon set definition.
Right.
And super important reminder, turn the validating admission controller back on as soon as you've upgraded.
Don't forget, beyond patching and this temporary fix, you should really think about putting some strong network security measures in place.
Yeah.
Restricting access to that admission controller is absolutely critical. You want to make sure that only the Kubernetes API server can talk to it, no external access whatsoever. Strict network policies are your friend here.
Okay, good to know. You should also ramp up your detection and monitoring. Go through your Kubernetes API server logs regularly. Look for any weird admission review requests. And think about using tools that can monitor your ingress traffic and spot any unusual activity.
Right.
Like attempts to load unexpected shared libraries, that kind of thing. Like in that attack scenario Phoenix Security described.
That's where Application Security Posture Management, ASPM, comes in really handy.
Right.
It gives you a complete view of your application security, both how it's configured, like your container images, and what's happening in your runtime environment.
Right.
This big picture view is crucial for finding and fixing vulnerabilities like Ingress Nightmare.
Totally. For discovery, ASPM often uses container vulnerability scanners like Trivy and Grape. These tools can automatically figure out what version of NGINX is in your container images just by looking at the OS packages and file signatures. You can also do some static analysis. That means going through your Docker files and image metadata to see what NGINX version you're using. Sometimes, even looking at the NGINX binary itself can tell you the version.
True. But you got to remember that static analysis isn't perfect.
Yeah.
Especially with those optimized or multi-stage container builds.
Yeah.
Sometimes the package information gets stripped out.
Right.
In those cases, runtime analysis is better. That's where specific Kubernetes scanning tools look at the images of your running pods, including the Ingress NGINX controller.
Yeah.
That gives you a more accurate and up-to-date view.
And this is where ASPM really shines when it comes to figuring out what to fix first. Because it can connect the dots between your container image configurations and what's actually happening with your Ingress controller pods. It helps you prioritize your patching based on risk. Like Phoenix Security said, focusing on the Ingress controllers that are exposed to the internet, those are the ones to tackle first because they're at the highest risk.
Makes sense.
It's perfect sense.
Yeah.
By understanding which Ingress controllers are out there on the internet and which ones are running those vulnerable versions, you can be smart about how you use your security resources. You can fix the most critical problems first, which really shrinks your overall attack surface and makes you less vulnerable.
Okay, let's do a quick recap. We dug deep into these nasty vulnerabilities called Ingress Nightmare. They affect the Ingress NGINX controller for Kubernetes.
Right.
And these flaws, they allow unauthenticated remote code execution. That's something that, as Phoenix Security's research showed, ransomware attackers are really after.
Absolutely.
And this problem, it affects a lot of Kubernetes clusters out there.
A lot. The most important thing you can do right now is update. Get your Ingress NGINX controller to one of the patched versions, 1.1.1, 1.1.5, or 1.7.
Yep. That's the best way to protect your Kubernetes environment.
Definitely. So here's something to think about. How much do you actually know about your Kubernetes ingress configurations and the software that's running in your environment? Are there any blind spots? Could adopting a proactive ASPM strategy help you not only with this specific Ingress Nightmare situation, but also just give you better visibility all the time
Yeah.
and improve your overall security, especially when it comes to those high privilege components like admission controllers? It's all about building up your defenses and really understanding where you might be vulnerable.
Absolutely. Layered security is key, and knowing your attack surface is step one.
Food for thought.
Indeed.